Chapter 7, Section 7 is positive rational exponents. So what we're doing today is we're building on what we did yesterday and just making life a little bit more complicated. So yesterday we dealt with if it was just a 1 over n, and now that number is going to be any number other than 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to split it up into either x to the m and then take that to the 1/nth, or x to the 1 over m and then to the mth power. So basically we're splitting that m over n into something more manageable, so we'll just kind of do it in 2 steps today. So we've got 81 to the 3/4. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to split that up into 81 to the 1/4 and then that to the 3rd power. So you're going to kind of split 3/4 into 1/4 and 3, okay, because 1/4 times 3 is 3/4, so we're not in fact changing anything. So I should know from yesterday, 81 to the 1/4 is what to the 4th power is 81? Well, that's 3. And then I still have the 3rd power out there, so 3 to the 3rd is 27. Okay, so again, this is all no calculator, so you really want to know the powers on that sheet. Okay, you can obviously use it as we're learning here, but when you quiz and test, you're not going to be allowed to use that. Okay, so in example B, if I split apart 3/2, I'm going to go 25 to the 1/2 and then to the 3rd. So it's always 1 over the bottom number, and then the top number goes on the outside. So 25 to the 1/2 says what squared is 25? Well, that's 5. I still have my 3rd power, so 5 to the 3rd is 125. Okay. Example C has a fraction to the 2/3. So again, we're going to kind of do this twice. We're going to go 216 to the 2/3 over 729 to the 2/3. So you have to distribute that exponent to the top and the bottom, and then I'll split it. So I'll say 216 to the 1/3, and then that number squared, and then 729 to the 1/3, and then that number squared. Okay, so if I take a look at the top, 216 to the 1/3 is what to the 3rd power is 216, and that's a 6. And I still have my squared, so the top becomes a 36. On the bottom, I have what to the 3rd power 729, and that is a 9. I still have that squared, so I get 81. So my final answer is the fraction 36 over 81. Okay. Example D is kind of just learning how to simplify those a little bit too. So y to the 2/3 and y to the 3/4. If you remember way to the beginning of chapter 7, here I'm multiplying. I have 2 bases, which means I need to add those. So I really need to add 2/3 and 3/4. Well, to add fractions, I need a common denominator. So if I turn that into 12ths, 3 times 4 is 12, so 4 times 2 is 8, so that gives me 8/12. And over here, that would give me 9/12. So if I add those together, I would get y to the 17 over 12. Okay, so just remembering how to work with fractions is always good. Okay, so if I look at example E, I've got 27x to the 6th all to the 4/3. So again, remembering way back in the beginning of the chapter, you have to distribute that 4/3 to both of these. So that gives me 27 to the 4/3, and then x. And then here I only have one base, which means I need to multiply. So I need 6 times 4/3. Okay, so I'm going to write this all out so that you can see your process later. You might be able to skip some of these steps later, but for right now we're going to go through them all. Okay, so if I kind of do this in 2 parts, the 27 and the x are separate. So 27 to the 4/3 would be 27 to the 1/3, and then that to the 4th. So that would be 27 to the 1/3 is 3, and then 3 to the 4th gives me 81. So the 27 to the 4/3 turns out to be 81. And now I have to deal with the x part. So I have x to the 6 times 4/3. Well, that's really 6 over 1. And then you multiply fractions straight across. So that gives me 24 over 3. So that gives me 24 over 3 is 8. So my final answer is 81x to the 8th. Okay, so a longer process. Just make sure that you're kind of doing it step by step and looking at all your numbers and being very careful here. Okay. All right, so if I look at example F, I've got a to the 1/2, b to the 2/3 squared. Okay, so again, that has to be distributed to the a and the b. So here I have 1/2 times 2 is 1, so that just gives me a, and then b is 2/3 times 2, which is 4/3. Okay, put that 2 over 1 and simplify, and that's the end of F. Okay, so sometimes they're tricky in E, and sometimes in F they're pretty straightforward. Okay, example G, I've got x to the 1/3 times x to the 5/6 over x to the 2/3. So if I kind of deal with this top part first, I would have to add those exponents because I have two separate bases here. So if I put this in terms of 6, 1/3 is 2/6. So the top means I now have 7/6. And then bottom I have x to the 2/3. Okay, well, in order to divide with the same base, I need to subtract. So I really need to think of this as 4/6 down here. So I can subtract 7/6 minus 4/6 is 3/6, which simplifies to x to the 1/2. Okay, so just working with fractions, nothing you haven't done, just kind of remembering how to work with those without a calculator. Okay, example H is going into how to solve them. So if I have y to the 2/3 equals 25, very similar to what we did yesterday, to get rid of it, you have to raise each side to the reciprocal, okay, because 2/3 and 3/2 cancel. So now I get y equals 25 to the 3/2, and then I need to split that to 25 to the 1/2, and then to the third, which will give me 5 to the third, which gives me 125. Okay, you are flipping it because there's an equal sign. So a lot of you are going to forget to flip it. Okay, so if it's 2/3, you have to raise it to the 3/2. Okay, if you're trying to solve when there's an equal sign, you always need to take the reciprocal. Okay, so keep that in mind. But in example I, similar things stay the same. I should first divide each side by 5. So I get x to the 3/5 equals a -8. Okay, to get rid of a 3/5, I have to raise it to a 5/3. Again, I'm going to put that whole -8 in parentheses to the 5/3. Okay, so my 3/5 and 5/3 cancel. Now I've got -8 to the 1/3 and then that to the 5th. Okay, well, -8 to the 1/3 has to be a -2, right? -2 times -2 times -2 be a -8. And then that to the 5th power gives me a -32. Okay, so watch your negatives there. Because those were both odd exponents, my answer stayed negative. If one of those had been even, it could have possibly gone to be a positive. So be very careful there. Okay, example J. First, I would add 84 to each side. So that would give me x to the 3/2 equals 343. Okay, to get rid of a 3/2, you have to raise each side to the 2/3 power. So I'm going to get x equal 343 to the 1/3 and then squared. What to the third is 343? That's 7. Squared gives me a final answer of 49 here. Okay, so just building, okay, with one more step of taking the reciprocal. Example J, hopefully you're realizing I got to divide by 64 first. So I've got x to the 3/4 equals, and that doesn't reduce nicely. That gives me the fraction 27/8. And then to get rid of the 3/4, I have to raise it to the 4/3. Okay, so that cancels on the left side. And on the right, I've got a fraction to a fraction. So I've got 27/8 all to the 1/3, and then that whole thing to the 4th. So you have to say what to the third is 27. That's 3. And what to the third is 8. That's 2. So make sure you're distributing this 1/3 to both the 27 and the 8. And then that's all to the 4th. Make sure you're distributing the 4th to top and the bottom. So that should give me 81/16 for my final answer. Okay, so just be careful with fractions. Whatever you do to the top, you also have to do to the bottom. And L, one of your most complicated so far, subtract 10 from each side. 4x to the 2/3 has to equal 36. Then divide each side by that 4. So x to the 2/3 equals 9. Okay, to get rid of a 2/3, raise each side to the 3/2. So those cancel. So I'm going to get 9 to the 1/2 to the third. Well, what to the second power is 9? That's 3 to the third. Gives me a 27 for our final answer. Okay, so a lot like yesterday, just one more step. So just make sure you're going step by step. You're not skipping anything. You're watching your negatives and you're just being careful. Okay, see if you still have any questions. Okay, write them down and bring those to class tomorrow.